Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. How's everybody doing tonight? Good. So I wasn't planning on coming today, and there's various reasons. I think one of the biggest reasons I wasn't planning on coming today is that I'm just so tired right now. I've been tired for a while, but that's just because we have a new baby at home. So my wife and I, alhamdulillah, just gave birth to our new baby back in February, so alhamdulillah. But when Sister April asked me to come speak, I couldn't refuse just because it's Sister April. And I've done so much together with Sister April, and I've seen how much she's done in the community. And I actually attended the first board meeting for Rahma last year. They wanted me to be a part of the board. However, I have other things going on, and I couldn't commit that much time away from my house and away from my family. So I figured the least that I could do is come out here and share a few words with you. But Rahma itself is building something that's extremely vital for this community. It's something that we don't have today in Buffalo, and it's something that we truly do need. It's a house for women who are victims of domestic violence. And this is something that hits close home to me because I stand here before you today as a victim of domestic violence myself. Not that my wife has domestically abused me, however. But it was prevalent in my home when I was growing up, and I did bring my mother here with me today as well. My father passed away a few years ago, and growing up from the time that I was young until the time that he passed away, I didn't necessarily forget the things that went on in my household. And it's not that I'm angry about them, because I think my situation has kind of shaped me into the person that I am today, and I'm extremely thankful for that, and I give shukr to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for even allowing me to accept the deen of Islam, which I've done recently, and alhamdulillah, my entire family has joined Islam as well. And I'm working on my mom too, that's why I brought her here tonight. Just to give you some backstory about what domestic violence does. There's a lot of women out here, maybe even some women in this room today, that are subject to domestic violence. It will help the lives of so many people, and I think that's why you're all here today, because you see the importance behind it. And hopefully Allah allows you to open up your pocketbook and actually give to the cause so that we can actually get this done in our community, because it's extremely needed. And before I actually roll on with the rest of the program, I did want to take a moment to thank my mom for coming out here today, because it was extremely last minute. She didn't have any plans on coming out. She actually went out and bought an outfit in the last minute. So I truly do appreciate the fact that she came here. But my mom still struggles with a lot of the domestic violence that happened in our house when I was growing up. And one of the things that I know that she continuously tries to make up for is the lack of a childhood that we had. And I just wanted to, if you can come up here for a moment, Mom, I want to actually speak to you for a minute, yeah. I want to tell you, essentially, that I'm not upset, I'm not angry. I think what we experienced as children was different than what a lot of other children experience, but I think it helped shape our family into who we are. And one of the things that I haven't said to you in a very long time that I think I need to say to you, because this is what Islam has taught me. It's not to hold any grudges, but it's to tell you that I love you. And I truly do appreciate all the things you've done for me. And you don't need to ask me for my forgiveness, because I don't have to give you forgiveness. You did what you had to do as a parent, and I truly appreciate everything that you did for me. And I wanted to present you with something. She wasn't expecting that, and I don't think anyone else was either. But, well, so we can continue with the evening. I want to say thank you, everyone, for coming out, and thank you for being willing to open your hearts and give to this cause, because it's extremely important. Rahma wasn't there when I was a child, but there's children out there today that this can benefit. There's families out there today that this can benefit. And all it takes is the power of our community. And the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ told us the importance of protecting and maintaining our communities. And this is our responsibility. So I do see a lot of people here today. Some of you were at the Universal banquet that we had back in January. I know some of you are doctors and business owners and engineers and such. And we need to make this happen for our community because it's extremely important and it's a vital piece. We need to provide for our people. So with all of that being said, there is a video that's going to play. I'm not sure who's supposed to cue it up, but we're ready to move on to the next part of the program. And thank you.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Bismillah. Bismillah walhamdulillah. Wassalatu wassalam ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. As was mentioned in my bio, I had the distinct blessing and privilege of speaking alongside Pope Francis on his most recent visit to the United States. And for me, it was probably one of the most impactful experiences of my life to not just sit side by side with this man, but to engage him in conversation, to be in his presence. He and I spoke together at the Ground Zero Memorial Site at the 9/11 Museum to an audience of about 400 people, city officials, celebrities, faith leaders, 9/11 family members, but really a global audience in the millions, as somebody of the stature of the Pope uniquely commands. And a lot of people ask me, what was it like to meet the Pope? For some reason, the question I got asked the most was, what did he smell like? I said, I don't know, he smelled pretty good. A week after we spoke together at the Ground Zero site, a young woman in Ohio at Case Western University, where I was speaking, asked me, what was it like to meet the Pope? And I said to her, it was crazy to just see the number of people who were so moved by this man. Huge crowds of people would line up for hours, not even to hear him speak, but just to watch his car drive by. People who had a deep relationship with their Catholicism, people who had a tangential relationship with their Catholicism, people who weren't even Catholic. They were just moved by what he was saying and what he was calling to, and they wanted to be in his presence. I said the night before he and I spoke together, he delivered a message at a well-known cathedral in New York City known as St. Patrick's. There's about 3,000 people in attendance, and all of what he had said on that entire tour was scripted. English not being his primary language, Spanish being his primary language, he was reading off of papers. I said, for so many of those people gathered in that cathedral, this would have been the highlight of their life. The night that they not only got to hear the Pope speak, but for some of them, meet him in person, shake his hand, get a hug from him. A night that they would tell their children and their children's children about, and anything that would come out of this man's mouth, they would take as pure fact, just straight law. No doubt in it whatsoever. And so that night, he decided to start his remarks by going off script. And he began by first praying for 700 Muslims who had died that morning while performing the Hajj pilgrimage in Mecca. I said to that young woman, why do you think he would do something like that? He's in the city where the 9/11 attacks took place. The relationship between Muslim community, governmental apparatus, law enforcement, quite hostile, tenuous at best. No one would have faulted him had he not done it. They wouldn't have said, I can't believe you didn't pray for those Muslims. But he simply did it because he felt it was the right thing to do. This is a man who chooses to eat with the homeless rather than politicians. A man who asked his global constituency to take in Syrian refugees at a time when so many of the world leaders throughout, including many in our own country, were looking for every justification to keep them away. May Allah make things easy for the people of Syria. This is a man whose Vatican recognized the statehood of Palestine. A man who understands his existence as being much bigger than he himself. Who recognizes and leverages what he possesses. And he does, not with any condition or qualification, but just because it's the right thing to do. And when you juxtapose that example to so many examples that we are unfortunately bombarded with day in and day out, of individuals who are so motivated by their base desires, the fulfillment of their egocentricities, caring only of their own arrogant needs. Ideas pushing bigotry, hatred, racism. Not caring who it is that you have to step over in order to get what it is that you want for yourself. And as that spectrum is outlined in front of us, we have to decide where we want to lie on it. Tonight is a night that's about so many different things. But at the fundamental base of it, it's really about you and I. Because we came here to bring benefit to a beneficiary class that needs for us to recognize what our role is in remedying certain societal ills and injustices. But to understand primarily for you, as you gain introspection and you try to understand what brought you here tonight, recognize that what it is that you see of this demographic, survivors of domestic violence, sexual assault, various forms of abuses, but really anybody that surrounds you, minorities, those who are different from you in terms of race, gender, class, cultural heritage, country of origin, people who speak with an accent, people who talk a certain way, look a certain way, dress a certain way. What you see of people is not an indication of who it is that they are, but it tells you something about yourself. And how it is that you process and understand those that we have come to support tonight is not indicative of anything of where they are in their lives, but it's going to tell you something about what's going on in your own heart. And that's really what this night is going to be about. Our organs of sensory perception are not limited to the eyes that we see with, or the ears that we hear with, the hands that we touch with, the tongues that we taste with, even the minds that we think with. But a primary organ of cognition within us is a heart that processes and synthesizes all of the information that we consume through these other senses. Do you get what I'm saying? I'll give you an example. I took some of my students with me to MIT, where I was invited to give a lecture. There's about 500 or 600 people in attendance, and after I was done speaking, a lot of people came up to me and said, "That was really amazing, very inspirational." And then a young woman came up to me and she said, "My sister's a big fan of yours, can I introduce her to you?" I said, "Sure." And she walked arm in arm, holding her sister's hand all of the way to where I was standing, because her sister was blind, she couldn't see. As the conversation came to a close, this young woman who was blind, she couldn't see, she said to me, "You know, I thought you'd be a lot taller." I said, "What?" And she said, "Your voice is not coming from up here, it's coming from down here." I said, "Oh." One of my students who was with me, he said, "SubhanAllah, isn't it amazing? She's blind and she could tell how short you are." I said to him, "Oh yeah, that's so remarkable." But inside I was thinking, man, how short am I? A blind woman just told me I'm short. She didn't need eyes to see. Do you understand? And sometimes we take the most overtly simplistic perspectives. We look at just what's apparent, because we're not looking with real vision tied to wisdom, which in our tradition we call basira. You're not limited to just the eyes that you've been given, but you see things in a multifaceted capacity, rooted with a depth of understanding, because you're looking from your heart. But you're only going to be able to give this world what you possess to give in the first place. So if you have love, you will give love. If you have understanding, you will give understanding. If you have peace, you have mercy, you have compassion. That's what you'll give. If you have hate, you will give hate. If you have fear, you will give fear. If you have anxiety, you have confusion, you have distrust. That's what you're going to give. And as you start to navigate within yourself tonight, affirming for yourself your motivation and intentionality for being here, This is a conversation that's not just for us to recognize and affirm the amazing contributions of the men and women who have made this organization a reality, because they are fulfilling much responsibility that as a community we don't necessarily understand so much. If you are Muslim, you have to understand that beyond the rote memorization that we have tied to individual obligations that we regurgitate mechanically but don't look beyond form so much, is that we have communal obligation that is embedded within our tradition that says that all of us are responsible for the rest of us, and if none of us do what we are meant to do, then all of us bear the burden of responsibility towards that. The quintessential example that's given in books of fiqh, books of law, is that of the janazah prayer, the funeral prayer. That if somebody passes away, then there needs to be somebody who knows how to wash that body, shroud that body, bury that body, pray over that body. And if one person knows how to do it, then everybody is absolved from the responsibility of it. But if nobody knows how to do it, then everybody in the community bears the burden of responsibility, because you ain't honored the rights towards that person. And when it comes to social services, it's not that different. Just because you are living in your home and you are driving your car and you are eating your food and drinking your drink, in our tradition, a neighbor is not just the person next to you, the person behind you, the person in front of you, but it's 40 houses to your right, 40 houses to your left, 40 in front and 40 behind. And so if we are not building for ourselves, who is going to build for us? In the hadith, there is a woman by the name of Qayla bint Makhrama, radiallahu ta'ala anha. Qayla bint Makhrama, her story comes to us in a book called the Tabaqat of Ibn Sa'ad. And she tells the story of how when her husband passed away, her brother-in-law wanted her and her daughters to be married against their will. Qayla seeks to take her youngest daughter with her and go to seek the help of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam. And as she sets forth towards his city, this man comes behind her, pursuing her, strikes her to the ground, and takes the youngest daughter with him. In a day, she goes back into the city. And once she has gathered herself, she goes into the masjid at the time of the Fajr prayer, but she is still disoriented. She goes to stand in the ranks where the men are praying. One of the companions just guides her to where the rest of the women are. At the conclusion of the prayer, she goes and she speaks to the Prophet of God and tells him what it is that has transpired. He says, "Bring a parchment to me so that I can write what it is that needs to happen." And direct fatwa comes out of the Prophet ﷺ's mouth that neither Qayla nor her daughter should be forced to marry against their will. Every believing Muslim should help them in this cause. Muslims should do good deeds and not bad ones. Real simple, but so profound. If you ever thought that forced marriage is allowed in this religion, it's straight up haram. And if you make your children get married against their will, you are doing haram. And if you advocate for something like that, or you are silenced in the face of it, it's not okay. But integral to this conversation tonight, as the Prophet just didn't engage in empty discourse about permissibility and impermissibility, but when he saw inequity, he told his people that beyond the negation of it as an acceptable act, that every one of you needs to help them in this. It's not that different centuries later. What happens with us, especially in the Muslim community, is we put everything on the shoulders of religious scholarship. Why are the sheikhs not doing this? Why are the imams not doing this? Why are they not talking about this? You have empty conversations that are tied to rhetoric that don't really do anything except appease your own passivity. And I'm not saying this in an offensive way. I want you to be introspective, because beyond the conversation of right and wrong and do and don't, there's still women who are right now out there living in houses that are not homes. Confined to relationships with men who have no idea what it means to be a man. And if the only thing that you need to keep yourself passive is to be able to say, look at that mosque, look at that imam, he's not saying what he needs to say, they're not doing what they're needing to be doing, how does that justify that you're not doing what you can? How does that validate that you are not speaking with your voice? You want to point a finger and say someone else is lacking, but you forget that you still have the ability to do? And again, that's where it comes back to your heart. Because you can elevate yourself by denigrating the person who's not doing. You start living love, man. You start living mercy. You start living compassion. You start living hope. You start living your faith. You start living this deen. You live Islam. You're not stuck in a place where your comparison to someone else's inequities and inadequacies are somehow going to validate you because all you needed to do was point out where someone else was lacking. So you ain't built what you could build. That means you still didn't build it. And at the end of the day, there's so many who are left in a place where they are waiting for us to do not only what we are supposed to do, but what we are able to do, what we are capable of doing. You have to ask from the inside, why don't we get it done? $220,000 is needed to purchase this building. With the number of people in this room, if we can't raise the majority of that, if not shatter that goal, then we're not thinking from here. And it has to be bigger. It has to be comprehensive. Because it's not about just throwing money at somebody and hoping that it sticks in some way. But to be able to understand that even in the individualized rituals that we have that are mandatory upon us, there is still elements of being able to connect to people where they are from. A woman who is a survivor in my community came to see me after the days of Eid in Ramadan. And when we were giving out the Zakat al-Fitr, I gave to her about $3,000 or $4,000. The Zakat al-Fitr being an obligatory charity that Muslims give at the conclusion of the month of Ramadan to those who are in need as a means of benefit for them. They can celebrate the holiday, etc. I gave her this $4,000 and she put it right back in my hand. Now I know this woman. I know her when she came into my office with tears because she said, my husband who beats me, when he goes to work and my little kids, they go to school and daycare, I go and sit on a bench near my apartment and I cry because I wonder what my life has turned into. I know her narrative and her story, how when there was no shelters provided with real care and consciousness of her existence, and she turned to the governmental shelters that were provided for people in her situation. And she went in there not knowing how to speak English so well and was married at a younger age and no work experience and none of that. And she found more drugs and theft and prostitution there than anything else. And the struggles that she had to go through when people didn't understand that she lived years where she was consistently abused. And when she went to talk to people in the masjid, and they would say, of course you can stay in our home. But then their own anxiety, because they don't know how to deal with people and people's realities, brought her to a place where they would say to her, why don't you talk so much? Why are you always so quiet? Don't you know how uncomfortable you make us when guests come over? Maybe she's silent because for the first time in her life, she's actually able to breathe and sleep without worrying who's going to come in her home and thrash her. Maybe for the first time, she's in a place where she's actually learning how to digest minutes that go without being disrupted by violence and rage. And now when she's in my office and I give her this money, she hands it right back. I said, do you not need it anymore? She said, no, I definitely need it. I just don't know what I'm supposed to do with it. I've never had my own bank account. I've never had to pay a cell phone bill for myself. I don't have a credit card, let alone know how to apply for one. You keep it and tell me what I'm supposed to do with it. There are 200 of you in this room. Doctors, lawyers, engineers, academics, artists, activists, people who are aspiring towards certain professional ambition. Beyond your wealth, beyond your money, which you should give tonight, because what other thing do you need to give to? You gotta give your time. You gotta give your skills. You gotta give your credentials. You gotta give your resources. You are the most integral part to the growth of this. Because that woman who came to see me does not need money thrown at her that says, I fulfilled my obligation, but she needs people who are attuned to her reality, that recognize she needs multiple resources to enable her to get to the life that she's fully entitled to. So she's going to need somebody who understands mental health. She's going to need somebody who can teach her basic job skills, how to write a resume, how to use a computer, how to go for interviews. Don't most of you know how to do these things? But if you found courage complemented with love inside of you, and you went to our sister April and you said, this is amazing, and not only am I going to give you money, here's 10 hours of my time. I'm going to do your bookkeeping. I'm going to do your graphic design. When they need checkups and they need help and they need some type of physicals, I'm a doctor. They can come to my office. I'll do it for them. But the creativity gets stifled because the relationship with faith is tied simply to mechanics that are seen as an end rather than a means to something. Again, it's about what's in your heart. Because it could take this little to appease our own selves. But we're talking tonight not about making ourselves feel better. We're talking about helping to make somebody else's life better. This is communal responsibility. You're sitting with friends, you're sitting with family, you're sitting with people who you're blessed to share a meal with. Then it has to be done in the ways that we are poised uniquely to do it. And the consequence is not that people then just live their lives day to day. They have to make tough decisions in the absence of the resources that we are there to provide for them. I was 18 years old the first time I met a victim of domestic violence. A young Muslim woman who was in a political science class with me while we were doing our undergrad at New York University. She walked into class with all kinds of makeup caked on her face. And of course, there were the fools who would say to her that makeup is haram, why are you wearing it? She's covering bruises, man. And as we engaged each other in conversation and I asked her what happened, she said, I just fell down some stairs. I said to her, that doesn't happen from just falling down stairs. And then she opened up, telling me that her father wanted her to marry somebody miles and miles away in another country that she had no desire to be with. And when she voiced to him her disdain and said that I would rather not marry this person, her father's response was to hit her in the face over and over and over as her brothers watched. And now as she tells me and she speaks about it and she's letting it out and she's looking to me to help her, I have no idea what to do for her. I'm 18 years old. What I have learned about faith at this point in my life, what I have learned about life at this point in my life, has not poised me for anything other than this formulaic part to success that says, go to school, get a degree, maybe go to grad school, get married, have some babies, that's how life happens. I didn't know where to send her. And the rest of us who were students at that time, we didn't know what to do. Because the conversations that took place in the masjid, the conversations that were at the MSAs, were just about very simplistic understandings of gender interaction. How do you get married? The same thing over and over and over. young people at an institution of learning that is so enhanced that it's qualified as being higher in its nature can't tell whether or not it's haram for them to do this or do that when they're engaging with the opposite gender. So she ended up getting married to this person. And about 7 years later, she came to see me in my office. And now she came with a young daughter as a result of that marriage. And she told me about how this man emotionally neglected her, physically abused her, didn't treat her well. That when she turned to family, that all her family would say is that you better stay there because what will people think if you divorce this man? What will the community say? When she managed to take her daughter and leave on her own and she sat with me, she gave me a diary that she wrote in every single day pretty much during that entire time. When I got to a place in the pages where I read about how it felt for her to be in the evening hours physically intimate with this man. And she said every night it felt as if I was getting raped over and over and over again. I had to close the book. But now when she came, I knew what to do with her. How to help her, where to send her. Not just to the person who would send the regurgitated response, this is a test from God. Put your trust in God. Have your faith in God. What's that going to do for a woman who is literally living hell? And then on top of that, your response is going to tell her, maybe you just need to be stronger in your faith? And in reality, it should be, I'm sorry that we didn't do right by you. I'm sorry that all we do is point out flaws of other people. We build hundreds of masjids because we don't know how to get along with people of different cultures or races. And we put millions into parking lots and domes. But it's so hard for us to put something into just enabling you to stand on your feet. They exist, these women. And it's not just people who are married and they're going through this. A lot of families find themselves in really hostile situations. I had a young woman who came to see me who grew up going to an Islamic school. She was born with a facial disfigurement, and she said that my classmates used to make fun of the way that I look. She said sometimes I would overhear my teachers making fun of me, thinking that I couldn't hear them, but I could. And she said when I got old enough, I decided to have a reconstructive surgery done to fix my facial disfigurement. And she said, let alone the comments that I got from classmates and professors and teachers in my high school, I grew up in a house that didn't really have so much love in it. My parents yelled at me a lot, were quite harsh, would always tell me that I was ugly and that no one would ever want to be with me. And aside from the emotional harshness, the physical abuse that was present, it was there. She said, when I told my parents I was going to have this surgery done, my father's response to me was, there's no point in doing it. You will never be beautiful. You will always be ugly. And if you don't listen to me, God will be angry with you and punish you. And she decided to get it done anyway. When she went through the first round of surgeries, there was complications and they had issues in resuscitating her. She entered into a coma. And when, alhamdulillah, they were able to actually revive her, she said rather than being met with any warmth, the first response she got from her father was, see, I told you God would punish you. She went through the second round of surgeries. And when it was complete and successful, she said, for the first time, I enjoyed looking in the mirror and seeing the face that I saw smile back at me. I felt beautiful. I felt strength through that beauty, but even that was short-lived. Because my mother and father, they still would say to me, you are still not beautiful. You have no reason to smile. And she said, I realized for the first time how alone I actually am in my life. That when I was in that hospital, nobody came to see me. None of the Muslims that went to the Islamic school with me, none of the kids from my MSA when I went to college. She said, but for the first time I felt love and affection from those doctors and nurses and residents who made me believe that I was actually something special. So she said, I took a heavy metal can and I started to hit my face with it. And she said, I hit myself so much and so hard that I actually went unconscious as a result of it. She said, when I woke up in the hospital, I was distraught because the doctor told me I hadn't broken anything. So I was okay to go home. She said, now I'm just waiting to die. What do you think would have happened to her if she didn't have an office to walk into? What do you think would have happened to her if she didn't have a space to go? What would her days be like? What would her weeks be like? You've already had people who, mashallah, are so courageous that have come up here to tell you what it is that they've been through. You've heard stories and narratives, not of people miles and miles and miles away, but people who live in your own neighborhoods and communities. With love, we have to build for them. With love, we have to provide and support. And if it's hard to let go of the money, really ask yourself why that is. Some of you have the means tonight to give a lot. Not just $100, not just $500, not $1,000, but tens of thousands of dollars, potentially even hundreds. Don't let yourself leave from here until you get done what you have the ability to do. To create this as a mechanism that's rooted in the best of intentions, that allows for us to, inshallah ta'ala, have good endings because we start from good beginnings. And to not be motivated by guilt, to not be motivated by something that is rooted in negativity, but recognize as a reality this pervasive mentality that exists. And understand your role in being a remedy to it. If you fall into a tired rhetoric that somehow utilizes text and scripture to be able to justify mistreatment of women and children, I don't know whose sunnah you follow. Because the Prophet's wife, when she spoke of him, she said very clearly, لَمْ يَضْرِبْ رَسُولَ اللَّهِ إِمْرَأَةً وَلَا غُلَامًا وَلَا وَلَدًا قَطْ. That the Prophet of God, sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam, never struck a woman or a servant or a child, ever. And when he saw people abusing others, he didn't let them do it. There's a hadith in Al-Adab al-Mufrad where a companion is abusing a boy. And he says, I hear a voice behind me that sounds quite heavy and angry, that says, God has more dominion over you than you do over this child. And he says, when I turn around, I see the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, and I say to him, Ya Rasulullah, he is free from this. And the prophet says to him, good, because had you not done so, you would burn in the fire like a piece of coal. He leaves no doubt that it's not okay. And it's very different in comparison to people who struggle with other things. Because people would come and they would say, Ya Rasulullah, I committed zina. Ya Rasulullah, I drank alcohol. Ya Rasulullah, I did this, I did that. And he walked with them. And he let them believe that they could still move in a direction despite what it was that they were struggling with. With the abuser, there was none of that. So our understanding has to come from what? You have the skills, you have the knowledge, you have the know-how. Your sense of validation does not have to come from existing apparatus. If the conversations that are out there are somehow lacking or they're non-existent, then we have to create what it is that we need for real, healthy communities. And to understand that part of that process is to be able to empower institutions like this to get done what it is that we need to get done. I went to Texas to speak at a retreat that was for families, men and women, young and old people. And one of the things that I had in my itinerary was separate sessions that were male and female only at one point in the day. And so I'm sitting down with these men. Some are college students, some are recently married, some are older and have their own children. So I talked to them about domestic violence and gender interaction and things like that. And we were in Texas with mostly people from Houston. So I broke them up into groups of 10 and I gave them a scenario of a young woman who had reached out to me from Houston, who had said that her Muslim boyfriend was increasingly becoming quite hostile towards her. And she said, I noted that he had started to mock my ideas and opinions and make fun of me in front of people. That his anger would get uncontrollable. He would tell me things like I'm not intelligent. And abuse is not just hitting somebody. There is emotional abuse, there is verbal abuse. These are things that are real. And she said that one day when we were having a conversation that seemingly got him more and more upset, in the middle of our university main campus building, he grabbed me and threw me against the wall. The security guard came and tried to see what was happening. And so I said to these young men, what would you tell this young woman if she came to talk to you and seek your help? Your classmates, say she was your sister, say she was your daughter, what would you tell her? And I gave them some time to think it out and talk about it. If you believe that somehow our religion tells us from some skewed understanding that you're supposed to cover people's sins, that you don't talk about somebody abusing somebody, you don't get the concept. That's not a time to be silent. It's not a time to compel and push people through hours and hours of unnecessary counseling. The man wants to get counseled, let him get counseled separate from the person that he didn't see as a blessing in his life, and now he's going to lose that blessing. The number of people who sit down and they just throw out this regurgitated nonsense that in Islam, God hates divorce. It's still allowed. I've sat down with people who I have sent survivors to, and they've come back and said that that sheikh, that scholar, that man, that woman, they did nothing for me. And it's not just men, it's women too. And when I call them and I say, what are you thinking? They say, if we were to start helping people get divorced whose husbands beat them, do you know how many divorces would take place? I said, that's not your decision. You don't get to play games with people's lives. But if they're not going to do what they're supposed to do, it doesn't mean that we justify not doing what we're able to. Do you see this woman in your heart whose father told her that she's not beautiful? Do you see this woman in your heart who sits on that park bench and cries, wondering what it is that her life has come to? Do you see these young children who grow up in hostile homes that are not just low-income homes or people from certain neighborhoods, but as was said before, it doesn't discriminate. It happens to the wealthy, it happens to the poor, it happens to people of every skin color. But it only perpetuates itself because of our indifference and our passivity. There's nothing that you will ever be able to have that's more valuable than the du'as of that mother that you help facilitate a new existence and life for. There's nothing that you will be able to buy and spend and hold on to in your limited time in this world that's going to somehow make more sense to own in comparison to helping these individuals get to the life that they're entitled to. I'm going to tell you, man, I wished I lived in Buffalo. Because $220,000 in Manhattan, New York, couldn't even buy me a room the size of this stage. You want to ask me what I'm trying to do? I've set up multiple businesses. Some of you have eaten at them. Butcheries, burger stores, I own a bunch of edible arrangements. The sole purpose to create revenue in order to build a domestic violence shelter. Because Manhattan is expensive. But in my community, I don't go a week without somebody reaching out who's telling me that somebody is abusing them. And so I could say, why is it not being built? Or I could say that I'm going to get it done. It might take time. It might be about just pushing the message over and over and over. At the end of the day, it's just money in comparison to somebody else's life. Look deep inside tonight. They want to raise $100,000. They're going to pass out to you pledge forms that are like this. Checks, cash, you can give your zakah, you can give sadaqah, just give something. They're a registered non-profit. If you work at most corporations, they have gift matching programs. You might have to register them as an entity, but it can make a big difference. So I'll give you an example. In my community, we utilize it a lot. There's a woman who works at Johnson & Johnson in our community. Johnson & Johnson gifts matches 2 to 1. She gives us $10,000 a year. Johnson & Johnson gives us another $20,000. It turns into $30,000. So you work at some kind of corporation, a pharmaceutical, some type of business, go and look at your HR. Do they have a gift matching program that I can double, triple? And that doesn't mean that you should give half of what you wanted to give or a third of it, because somebody else is going to cover. Give more than what you thought you would give, and then let them just add on to it. If you have a credit card gift that you want to make, just check it off on the form and they'll call you for your credit card information. And beyond tonight, you need to go and be the ambassador for this, the advocate for it. Because the responsibility that we have to one another as brothers and sisters doesn't stop just by being present for moments one evening. If you don't get up to pray for yourself, get up and pray for these people, man. Don't lose their consciousness in your thoughts. And build real love and connectivity. Because I've been in conflict zones. I've been in refugee camps. I've been in parts of this world, parts of this country, where I have seen the most atrocious things come from humanity. I've also seen really remarkable, amazing individuals. People who are motivated by something bigger than just their base desires. And you don't have to be in competition with anybody. Because the only person that you really need to compare yourself to today is the person you were yesterday. And these are the instances that give us an understanding of where it is that we really are and what it is that we're really attached to. You might not be able to buy that thing you wanted to for yourself. You might have to eat a little bit less. You can fast. You might have to be in a place where the clothes that you wear are not as designer or brand supersized. If that woman even gets one night of just peaceful rest, after decades of living in whatever it is that she lived through, is there really a question as to what it is that you could support? The growth will be consistent. We buy this building, 3 bedrooms, 3 apartments that have 2 bedrooms and 1 that has 1. Doesn't mean that just one person will live in each of those rooms. And if I live in very tough circumstances for most of my life, I'm not going to have a problem in living in a smaller space if that space is going to afford me just rest and peace and tranquility. Where you can impact even one person. And you start to enable and allow for just one heart to be able to be made feeling whole again. That can make all of the difference. So a story that I'll end with that I was taught when I was very young is about a young man who was a known author in his community. This young man, he would gain inspiration for the work that he would write by going out and being in nature. And one night he goes and he walks through the shoreline of a beach and he sees in the distance a figure that's doing some kind of dance. And it intrigues him and he walks closer and closer to it. And when he gets close enough, he sees that it's not dancing, but it's a young boy. And there's thousands of starfish that have washed up onto the shore and he's throwing them into the water. When he engages him in conversation, he asks him, "What are you doing?" The boy says, "I'm throwing the fish into the sea." He says, "Why are you doing this?" And he says that they washed up with the tide, and if I don't do it, they're going to lose all of their water and dehydrate, and they will surely die. And the young man, he looks up and down the coast, and all he sees is fish upon fish. And he looks to the boy and he says, "There are so many of them, there is no way you're going to get them all back into the water. What is the point of what you are doing? What difference will it make?" And the young man, upon asking this question of the boy, has the boy look at him, look down at the ground, pick up one of the fish, throw it into the water. He says it made a difference to that one. If you can impact even one heart, don't hesitate. If you can let yourself be what it is that they need, then go out and be it to the very best. If God elevates you as a vehicle and means through which He feeds His creation, He clothes His creation, He gives shelter to His creation, He gives strength to His creation, He is merciful to His creation, He is generous to His creation, He gives strength to His creation, He loves His creation, what better station do you need to reach in this world? But again, it has to start from here. Look from here. And ask yourself why you see this in the way that you see it. Do you see it as something that is burdensome and boring? Do you see it as something that is tiresome and irritating? Do you see it as what it actually is? Do you see them for who it is that they actually are? And do you understand, primarily, that tonight isn't really about anybody else, but it's going to tell you a lot about you and what it is that you hold to be important. Make sure that you don't leave without letting yourself know that you are the best person to be in this room. And you were put here to make sure that what you can get done gets done in the best of ways. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guide us and protect us. May He bless us with knowledge that benefits us. May He bless us with the tawfiq to understand and implement that knowledge into our daily lives. And may He guide and bless us all. Wallahu ta'ala alam wa billahi tawfiq. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.